This episode contains references to severe sexual violence. These discussions take place from 101 to 655 and are not referenced again thereafter.
This is Rating Descending,
where we watch IMDb's Worst 250 so you don't have to.
My name is Abigail Ward.
And I'm Michelle St. Clair.
And tonight we are not doing Baise-Moi.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons behind that.
Yeah.
But namely, let's just get straight into it so we don't have to spend too much time talking about this film.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather talk about far more pleasant things for this episode. This is going to be a bit of an odd episode because instead of talking about this film, we'll just be talking about much more pleasant things.
That's good.
Yeah. I just feel that tonally this movie didn't fit with our podcast. There's a couple of reasons for that. It is a rape revenge film. It shows a really horrific rape. And then it's about a woman kind of regaining her power through sex. I don't want to watch a rape scene.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch such a graphic, morbid film. And there was nothing that brought joy about it. And I really just didn't think that I could pull anything fun or joyous or appropriate out of that film into this podcast.
Yeah, I did watch it, which ended up being good that one of us did watch it because we could make a much more informed decision.
For sure.
Yeah, it's really graphic and explicit. A lot of the sex, both consensual and non-consensual in the film, is unsimulated.
Yeah.
And it's an art house film. Like one of the main things I kept coming back to when we were talking about how would we approach this film is just that like we weren't prepared for this to happen.
No,
on the list at all.
Exactly. It wasn't the kind of film we thought we would be encountering on the list. Next week's episode is exactly the kind of film we thought we'd be encountering on this list. But Baise-Moi was not.
The whiplash from last week to this week to next week is going to be absolutely insane.
Something worth noting, which you told me about.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the film because I refused to watch rape scenes, and I just didn't want to put myself through it, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And even though I could have watched the film around the rape scenes, the entire, the tone of the film was so off. And I didn't want to put myself into that headspace. Also considering just how shitty fucking Melbourne lockdown is.
Yeah.
A variety of health issues that I'm going through. I didn't want to put myself through it. And also it's our fucking podcast, so we can do what we want. But you brought up that, and it is important to note, that at least it wasn't made by a series of male filmmakers mishandling the story of a woman's rape revenge story. It was a group of women. Yeah,
I after watching it, I needed some time to process my thoughts about it because it is that kind of movie. And I wrote what is sort of like a pseudo angry essay about it that I was going to sort of try and address on the podcast. And then I needed to look up one particular thing. And in looking up that thing, I came across this long blog post of someone detailing the history of it and talking about the director, who is this French woman who wrote the original book, and had a lot of quotes of her talking about why she made it, how she, the other director, and both of the lead actors had been previously involved in sex work. One of the main characters is a sex worker, and how, without referencing who, mentioned that 3 of the main people in it had been at some point gang raped, like the protagonist of the film was. And it didn't make me like the film. It didn't change my underlying sort of problems with it, but it really made me change how I was thinking of it.
Yeah. And this is what I said to you through a multitude of upset texts the day that I was due to watch it, and even a couple of days before, and that I am not here, I'm not watching content to be absolutely shattered. I'm not here to watch movies that break my spirit and have no essence of hope or joy. I watch movies as a form of escapism from the literal horrors of the world, and I don't want to put myself through watching bullshit like that.
Can I read out the particular string of texts that you sent me about it? Because it was almost like a poem, and I thought it was wonderful.
Thank you.
Let me just find it. Yeah, so this was after we were starting to realize, I don't know how we're going to do this episode. And I gave you the time codes of the rape scene. And you said, thank you for that. I just don't fuck with rape scenes. Life is too short to watch rape scenes. I am not on this mortal coil to be traumatized or made to feel horrible. I've had enough. And there's just something about the way, like, each of those pauses was a new line. It made it feel like this great sort of, like, mini poem to me about, like, being able to choose how you're going to consume content. I loved it.
Thank you. No, I stand by it. I mean, like, especially, like, when you're going through, like, a shitty patch of your life, why put yourself through that? Like, I've had a tough week. I've been really sick. I've been really ill. My back has been really hurting. It might be related to the stupid autoimmune issue that keeps coming up in my life. And I've also been really down because of Melbourne lockdowns and a variety of things that's affected it. So why would I want to add to my already quite low mental state by piling that on top? I'm not doing that to myself.
And initially, I was still sort of okay with doing it and just doing the episode and just talking about it, because I'm like, well, look, we're a comedy podcast, but we do also like review these movies genuinely, and that's part of our shtick.
Yeah.
But you pointed out the thing that made me go, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't do an actual episode. The integrity of the list doesn't matter. Which was, I don't want to make fun of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, if it was... Can't. Yeah, if it's not like Human Centipede, which is very genre and exploitative in a way that's also very silly.
Yeah.
This felt more immediately exploitative, and then also knowing that it was made by women, I'm like, I don't want to make fun of the end result nor its intentions.
Yeah, 100%.
I think I have legitimate problems with it, but I don't think they warrant crass jokes.
I think as a result of this, I would like to spend this episode talking about something much more positive, and it's a little way to get to know us, your hosts, your kings, your queens, your mentors, your masters, your captains, your saviors, your guardians, us, Abigail and Michelle. What I want to ask you, Michelle, and what I'd want us to both delve into for the next 30 to 40 minutes.
Sure.
Is... what are your 5 favorite films that bring you comfort and joy? Ooh. And what was your experience watching them for the first time? I'll give you a moment to put it together in your head, or figure out the 5 you'd want to talk about, or even like the first 2 to jump off from.
Yeah. But because that's hard, because it's not... I like this because it's not 5 favorite movies. It's 5 favorite comfort
Exactly.
movies.
It's not like the best films or your top 5. I mean, the 5 films that bring you the most comfort and joy, that when you finish watching the film, you feel lighter, you feel inspired, you feel seen, you feel at peace. Films like that.
Yeah.
And it's in no particular order. You don't need to rank it. So you go first and we can jump between one or another. One and another.
Now, look, it's a hard question, especially since I am, like most people, someone who, when asked what's my favorite of something, my brain immediately deletes all memory of that art form from my brain.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky that I put up like 100 posters on the wall so I can at least look at them.
Yeah.
So I'll go with just what is my first thought of something. So this is no particular order. This is just something I know would be on the list, just thinking of my previous behavior, which is Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Nice.
It's not a movie that I think is like settled enough to give like true, like, I feel sad and I need, like, I like things that are quiet and sleepy. But especially the first 2/3 of that movie just give me such joy and serotonin, and it's easy to watch. It's also like a kind of movie I hadn't seen before. I'm a huge fan of the comics before the movie came out, and I love what the comics did in the back half rather than what the movie did. But the movie was still told its story well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know it's one of those things, like, I wouldn't think of it as a comforting movie, but I've so many times been like, I just want to put something on that makes me happy. And that's what I put on because it's fun. It's fun and it gives me joy and it's made well.
When did you go see it? What was the experience of seeing it for the first time?
I went to go see it in 2010 when it came out. It was like right at the tail end of the run.
Yeah.
When it was at the point where people realized that it was a bomb. And so like no one was in theaters, but it was astounding and surreal. Like, I'd been so excited for it all year because I had read all the comics. And I'd finally gotten this chance to see it, and it was just like, holy shit. It's from another planet. Like, it's one of those movies you see and you're like, oh, you're not like pulling references. You're making a new kind of movie.
Edgar Wright has such a distinctive style. He was like the perfect choice for that film. No one is as snappy and as quick-witted and as fun and as fresh as Edgar Wright. It is such a joy to watch. And Michael Cera is a great Scott Pilgrim. The casting was immaculate.
Yeah, and I love how like different art forms communicate differently. What I loved about Scott Pilgrim is that it knew how to communicate as a film and then also knew how to use comic style in things like the paneling. To like show images and emotions simultaneously. I was like, this is a comic book movie.
Yeah.
You know, it was great. What about you?
Okay, first on my list, again, it's not in any particular order, but it's the first thing that sprang to mind. And it's a good one too. It's like I should save it for last, but I want to talk about it now.
Yeah.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Great choice.
Great choice, right?
Excellent.
I mean, I watch it in cinemas. My experience with it is my mum would put it on every single Christmas Eve. And as a kid, I thought it was kind of slow and boring. But as I got older, the exposure to it, I loved it. I adored it. I mean, anyone that comes across it now will adore it. It's not a hard thing to like. I was just a naive child. But yeah, it's really special to me because it's my mum's favorite Christmas film. And I go to see it in cinema every Christmas. There is something so remarkable about not just the theme behind it or the message. It's literally like that final scene where everyone comes together and brings in like the $8,000 that he's short on. They come together as a community to pay it back to George. Spoilers. And there's that fucking line in it where his brother flies in through a blizzard to make sure that his brother's okay. And when all the money is like stacked in that basket and everyone's paid what they've got, his little brother is just like, he holds up a little glass of sherry and he's like, to my brother George, the richest man in town.
Yeah.
That line makes me bawl every Christmas because it's not about being rich in terms of money and and material possessions. It's about being rich in friends and community, and it fucks me up. No film makes me cry the way that moment cries.
Yes.
It makes me cry, and it makes me cry from such a deep warmth and happiness.
Spoilers, the life was wonderful.
It was such a wonderful life.
I can't believe America watched that movie and they were like, man, you're right. And then they made their whole country Potterville. We can't talk. We've spent the last 20 years doing what they did in 50 years. So, you know.
What's your second one, Michelle?
Oh, gosh. This is hard for me. I'm bad at remembering.
It doesn't need to be a perfect list.
You're right. It doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to go with an obvious choice that is my gut instinct. I don't know. I'm going to actually just say Star Wars, and I want to clarify because it depends on the age. Because when I was a child, I think I've even mentioned this on the podcast before, when I was a little kid, Attack of the Clones was my favorite fucking movie, and my dad had a VHS of it. So when I went to his house,
because you also really hate sand.
I do hate sand. Sand is not good. It's rough. It's coarse. It gets everywhere.
Tell me more. And then you steal a pear out of my hands while I'm trying to eat it.
Yeah, it was my favorite fucking movie when I was a little kid. And then, you know, like when I was a teenager and I went back and watched the originals, I was like, fuck yeah. And like, even though I like Empire Strikes Back, it's like easy to put on the first one of a trilogy. So like Star Wars was the one I would put on, and I just like adored it. And then I think from the day it came out, it's been Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Which I will put on without putting on Force Awakens. I'll just put it on.
To any listeners that didn't like The Last Jedi, we disown you. We don't. We need you. We really need all the listeners we can get.
And my experience of watching that was that you and I drove to Newcastle, which for non-Sydney people is like a solid 3.5 hour drive away.
On a really hot day.
Yeah.
And we went to go see it at the old Civic Towers Cinema, which is now gone, by the way.
Oh, no.
I know. It had this really old, 70s feel to it. It was like, this beige brick. It was really ugly from the outside, but really retro on the inside.
It's because
it's a real landmark.
We're doing like a tradition. We went to go see Force Awakens in the Blue Mountains in a small family theater. So we were like, let's do that.
Place called Vic Flicks.
Yeah.
Up in Mount Victoria. It's a stunning little cinema. And then, we went down to Bowral for like the
Rogue One.
Rogue One.
Yeah.
We just went to all these nice little country cinemas to watch Star Wars. It was such an event.
The only exception was Rise of Skywalker. We saw at the event in George Street, and I will say, it deserved it.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't drive 3 hours to see that.
I stand by. I think the back hour of it, even if I disagree with the story decisions, was great to watch at the time.
I still remember when we went to go see The Force Awakens and you were like dying to go piss, and finally you went up and left, and you missed the scene where it's revealed that Snoke says to, you find out that Kylo Ren is the son of Han Solo, and you came back and you're like, did I miss anything? And I was like, yeah. Yeah. It's a big scene.
Did I miss something? But yeah, going to see Last Jedi was fantastic. I remember walking out of the cinema and like being blown away by it. And there was this like almost tension in the air, I think, because some people in the audience probably didn't like it.
Yeah.
And like we didn't say anything for like a minute. We just like walked a little further away, and then we were like to each other, "Did you like it?" We're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah."
The mark for me of a man worth dating was if they liked The Last Jedi or not.
Yeah.
Because if they didn't like The Last Jedi, it's probably because they had an issue with women taking authority in a film. Poe was right, all right? Holdo was just being a bitch. Fuck off. Go wank tonight. Anyway.
What about you? What's your second one?
My second one. Oh, I got this. My second one, controversial because of the director.
Okay.
And I know some people don't believe in this,
Mm-hmm.
but I can enjoy art and separate it from who created it. And it doesn't mean that I forgive the person or condone their actions, but I can watch things by maybe someone inherently problematic and still like value parts of it.
Sure.
I really like the film Radio Days by Woody Allen. And let me explain. Woody Allen, no, don't condone. He's a terrible person, like absolute pedophile, absolute abuser. No. But his film Radio Days is sublime. And it's one of the only films where you don't have Woody Allen being a fucking narcissist in the lead carrying in like the lead role with like this 17-year-old girl fawning over him when he's just completely self-absorbed and she's just pretty. I can't stand the way he portrays himself in his films, and I can't stand the way he portrays his female leads. But Radio Days is almost exempt because it's this homage to the golden age of radio. It's set in the 1940s or 1930s in Rockaway. And it's just like, it's really just a nod of the head to like an era that's gone in the history of broadcasting. It's these little stories about his family and these stars on the radio. And it's just funny and sweet. And it really gives me this like warm, fuzzy feeling every time I watch it. And there is something really nice about Woody Allen's neurotic voiceovers where he's like, Rockaway Beach, you know, and it looks really stormy, but I always liked it that way. Like, I love it. I can get behind it.
All my life I've been in this ant colony.
I just managed to bust out. But my wife, she left me, and in such small portions. I love it. And every time I talk about my love for that film, there is that huge disclaimer of Woody Allen surrounding it, and I get it. But I do value that film, and it gives me a really good feeling inside. And I try and separate that from who I know this person is. And by illegally downloading it, I hope I'm not supporting him. But yeah, I and like even his films like Annie Hall and Manhattan, like I do like them. Like I do like them as films. I think they're really fresh and funny. It's just that himself in his films is annoying and repugnant. And like the female leads are always these like doting women that he kind of breaks down to depend on him, only to leave them at the end and then beg for them back. It's frustrating.
It's hard. It's hard to pass the particular relationship between art made by someone who we now know is awful. Because I'm like, well, I still enjoyed Annie Hall and Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
But I also find it really hard these days to rewatch Harry Potter or the IT Crowd. You know, I can't.
Yeah.
It's like, is that a fair line to draw?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think more than anything, like with all four of the things I just said, I think that Roman Polanski and Graham Linehan shouldn't work again and then I'm going to ad hoc to that, I guess, just of my own volition, choose which one I watch. I don't know what that means, but I don't know. It's such a hard thing to specify.
Definitely.
I don't think we figured it out culturally yet.
Yeah, 100%. It's like Woody Allen shouldn't work again. Woody Allen should stop making films. He shouldn't be allowed back in the industry.
Yeah.
But also, that's only because those things have come to light. He never should have been able to in the first place.
Yeah.
Really. But it's a really touchy subject for sure. And I think I do feel a bit guilty because I'm like, yeah, he's a fuckhead and I don't want to support him. But I have watched his films and I watched them as a kid. I remember watching Radio Days with my parents as a kid and I loved it and I couldn't help it. I was like, ugh. But that's my third.
Nice. My third then, I was after the first two, I was like, now I got to really think about it because those are the obvious ones. But as soon as I saw it on the wall, I was like, that is correct. It's The Truman Show. Because there's something about that movie that deeply gratifies me. Maybe the experience of watching someone realize that the things around them that they've held true and known are actually maybe not real, and he needs to reassess who he is fundamentally as a person, has something comparable to the trans experience, but also maybe just
Truman is a trans it's a trans allegory for sure.
Yeah,
he's a trans icon.
But also that's just
true woman. True, I am a true man. That's what he realizes at the end, right?
Yeah.
Nice. That's sick.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just what modern living feels like, and that's part of the satire of the movie. But it's just this thing about the movie. I feel like it's almost underrated. Like, we know it's a good movie, but we put it in the bucket of movies that are pretty good. But the direction in that movie is astounding. There's something around, like, 35, 40 minutes in where Truman just walks out into the street and the music is playing and it's just shots of a man looking around him as everyone continues on their life, and yet you can feel the emotions shift. You feel yourself shifting in your relationship to this world. And the ending of it is the only movie that can make me cry every single time.
It's incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey is an incredible actor.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is. It's a very emotion-driven film, and I'm a very emotion-driven person. So it just taps into something in my brain that makes me go like, yeah, it's someone like triumphing to just discover like how he can possibly be part of a world. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I like. I love that movie. I watched it as a kid, so I don't remember the very first time I watched it. But
it was
my
probably
mum
on
would
like
have showed it.
free-to-air TV or something, right?
It definitely would have been my mum specifically showed it to me.
Nice.
My mum has a really good taste in movie with an undercurrent of really bad taste in movies.
Right.
But she went out of her way to show me so many good movies as a kid.
Yeah, we were so lucky. My mum was also obsessed with films, and we lived right around the corner from a Blockbuster. So every single week we were allowed to rent. I think the deal was like 11 films for $7 or something, or it was 7 films for $11.
Yeah,
and you'd get to keep it for 7 days. And me and my brother would always just like divvy up our choices and just basically watch one a night, and it was fantastic.
Same, and like. I would do the same thing of like we would go to the video rental store and then rent a bunch of videos. I know that Netflix on paper is cheaper with more choices. And yet I think people watch less movies because there's something about the specificity and like curation of like going somewhere and then getting a specific movie that prompts you to watch the movie. Because we know statistically that on platforms like Netflix, people rewatch more than they watch new movies. So it's not like now that people have Netflix, they watch, as you said, like 11 movies in 7 days or whatever. They watch one movie in a month.
Yeah.
You know? There's something about that, like, there's so many parts of how we orient society that, like, sound good on paper and that they're cheaper with more access, but all they actually do is muddy the waters enough that we aren't actually moving forward.
100%. When you go to the video shop, you're like, or the video store, you're like, I'm in the mood for something now and I have to make up my mind in the next 20 minutes. And that's my set choice for the week. And I want to get my money's worth, so I'll watch all of it.
Yeah. Also, streaming services for movies, games, and music are all predicated on underpaying the artists that create the content. It's inherently unsustainable unless you just decide at a certain point that you will never pay the artist the amount that they need to, and it's never going to end up working out in favor of the consumer. It's just going to kill everything.
Funded by the New South Wales government, Australia.
That's just a side point. This is a nice, comforting episode. What's your third one?
I feel like it's very schlocky.
Oh, schlocky's good. This is comfort.
Yeah,
this is not
like pure comfort. It's not like my favorite art house films. This is pure comfort, which happens to coincide with a lot of Hollywood blockbusters, guys. So get over it.
I'm the audience, and I'm mad about this. I'm going to send you a series of aggressive emails.
I'm going to burn your emails. I'm going to print them out and burn them.
It's not just that you're burning them. It's just you're going out of your way to wasting paper and everything.
I don't even own a printer. I'm going to go to Officeworks.
Oh my God.
I'm going to pay 10 cents a sheet, and I'm going to print out your email, and I'm going to burn it.
You're not even going to borrow a friend. You're going to go to Officeworks and get them to...
I don't even have a lighter.
Oh, American listeners, think of I think Kinko's. Oh yeah, who fucking knows?
I don't know. You're all wild.
You guys, everything's named different there. I don't understand it.
What I was saying, my third choice is Back to the Future.
Oh, great choice.
It was just this thing. My experience with Back to the Future is that it was always on free-to-air TV. It's one of my mum's favorite films. And we would just watch it every single time it came on. We were obsessed with the first film. We got the DVDs, watched the second and the third compulsively. But that first film is like perfection. I remember on my second date with Claude, I was keen to impress him, but not keen enough to put aside the fact that Back to the Future is quite sloshy action trash. It's not trash. It's really good.
It's tightly fucking scripted.
Yeah, it's really well written. But I was just like, I know you're into art house films, but I don't care. I'm showing you Back to the Future because you just told me you've never seen it. So on our second date, I made him watch it with me. And he loved it. It's a good time. Back to the Future is really well written, perfectly structured. It's incredibly entertaining. It's really nostalgic. And I'm obsessed with time travel. I always loved time travel short stories. I wrote a lot of stories about time traveling through portals as a kid. I know I'm a fucking nerd. Don't at me about it. And the scenes of Marty seeing his town reflected 30 years between the two, and especially in small town America, well, it's definitely California, but small town America was so captivating. It just entranced me as a child, and it still does to this day. And I think because I have such an obsession with time travel and retro nostalgia, it still just ticks every box for me. Marty McFly, amazing hero. And for years, I in a very contrived way, tried to sleep with my arm around my back and on my chest because that's how he used to sleep. I wanted to be him. It's very uncomfortable. I'm not fucking with that again.
But you know how it's the 2 Pines Mall in the beginning, and then it's the 1 Pine Mall later?
He hits one of the pines.
No, it's because of 9/11.
Oh my God, it's an allegory.
That movie's crawling with 9/11s.
You know what else some people call pines? A bush.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Can you melt pines with jet fuel?
You know what some people call a flux capacitor? Steel beams.
3 steel beams in the shape of a Y.
88 miles per hour. That's the melting point, baby.
I remember when I went to go interview for one of my jobs at JB Hi-Fi. I'd already worked at JB Hi-Fi and I'd taken a hiatus, and I came back to work at a different store, and the managers interviewed me, and they were just like, oh, what are some of your favorite films? And I was listing some off. And then Stu was like, oh man, I love Back to the Future. He was like, you know how they put petrol in the DeLorean? And I was like, they actually use plutonium. And he was like, you got the job. I was such a little fucking nerd about it. He was like, she clearly knows her movies. And I became a disgruntled DVD chick for many a moon.
I remember I tried to get a job at one of the last blockbusters.
Same.
But I was fucking 18 and it was 2013. Everyone was like, we aren't going to be a business.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's a job here?
I remember I was 17, 16 applying for the Blockbuster around the corner.
Yeah.
And the guy was just like, we don't have the business to take on more staff. Like,
yeah.
they were already in a decline. I think they closed like the next year. It was tragic.
Yeah.
It became a gym.
There should be, even if it's like a new digital form, to go back to what I was talking to before,
I want to talk about digital forms.
I think the problem is that like we're too good at sticking with what we're currently do. Like human beings are imaginative as individuals, but I think socially, like as in larger groups, we're not very imaginative because we go, oh, well, there used to be things like video rental stores where they had the physical movie there. We go because the physical movie is there. That's not why you go. There's also because they will select movies for you. They know about movies. There's a culture to it as well. And then we go, oh, well, everyone's at Netflix and at home. Obviously, in the pandemic, that's a good thing. Now there's none of that curation. It only happens on specific websites like Letterboxd or on just other general social media. But like, if you had a store that was like video rental, but it was just like you could fucking hang out, pay like $15 and you can stay there for 6 hours and watch 3 movies that they're like, we have this specific library and a bunch of other people who want to watch this movie, like a micro cinema.
Yeah.
Rather than it being like, oh, it has to be a multiplex that needs to make $100 million per movie or it's going to go out of business. Just like a small thing, like what game shops do for board games. You know, board games haven't been killed by video games. Physical movies don't need to be killed by digital movies, you know? We're just not very imaginative at creating the spaces for things. That's why, like, we still go and watch people play live music, even if we can listen to a better recording of it on streaming.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I feel like we're lucky to live in Melbourne. Sydney is driving a lot of its indie cinemas just completely out.
yeah.
But Melbourne has a lot of really like nifty things set up. They've got the Coburg Drive-In. They've got like they've set up a cinema in the old prison up in Coburg as well, the Pentridge prison.
Yeah.
There's like an outdoor cinema. There's a lot of bars with rooftops with little cinemas attached. There's also blow-up cinemas. Like Melbourne's really, I think, like they're really they're really trying to concentrate their efforts on preserving cinema culture, but Sydney never did.
Well, for Sydney people, that's like if the Ritz was everywhere.
Yeah.
But notably, like all of them are about curation. And that's why they survive, is you go like, oh, I can go and watch a good movie if I go to the Astor.
What's your 4th movie?
I didn't think of one. I didn't know this was a format until just before. I'm going to pick something for my 4th one that is like, in some ways, almost an obvious choice. Because the part that I'm struggling with is I know easily what I would have picked when I was 17. 17-year-old Michelle was such a distinct person. And it's like, I feel like between the age of 17 and 23, I didn't really change. And 17 was just a manifestation of everything I was trying to do up until that point. But I now consume different media differently, you know? And I think it would be disingenuous if I gave an answer that's not true. Like I was going to say Big Lebowski, but I haven't watched that in a while, even though I used to watch it a lot when I was 18. You remember, I feel like I used to put that on a lot.
Yeah.
But a movie that I do put on for comfort now, even though it's a newer one and almost like an obvious choice, is What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh, yes.
Because it's great. It's also
fantastic.
Fun. Yeah, it is very specifically just fun. It's well made, but also we all like it, even though its structure is a little squishy. It doesn't have a very clear story engine for the majority of it. Like if the protagonist is Nick, then it takes a long time for him to be involved. Whereas if the protagonist is Viago, he's not very active or participatory in the story. Really at any point, right?
It's not like perfectly structured at all. It's not a very traditional film.
And yet it works fantastically. It's a lot of what made Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement funny for a really long time. And also Jermaine Clement doesn't get his credit for that movie. Because everyone's like, Taika Waititi, Jermaine Clement, I'm pretty sure co-directed it. Like they at least wrote it. They at least wrote it together.
I think Taika Waititi directed it, and him and Jermaine, like, they definitely wrote it together.
Yeah.
I think they might have co-directed the initial, like, they did a short on it.
Yeah. like, yeah, he's a big part of what makes that movie work.
Yeah. Him as Vlad.
Yeah.
The Beast.
And
leave me to do my dark bidding on the internet.
Exactly. It's just
Peter is 8,000 years old. He is not coming to the meeting.
It felt like this good like distillation of like the things I liked about Flight of the Conchords.
Yeah.
And also the things I liked about earlier Waititi movies like Eagle vs. Shark Boy, but also less so because Boy is very emotional, and What We Do in the Shadows is not emotional at all.
I think What We Do in the Shadows really excited me when I first saw it, because I think we first watched it together many years ago.
Yeah.
And I found it so exciting because I was like, yeah, this is the kind of cinema I want Australia and New Zealand to make. This dark, silly, surreal comedy. It's heightened. It is a high concept premise, but it has the dry, down-to-earth humor of Australians and New Zealanders, and I love it.
Yeah, that's my pick. And I remember the first time I watched it was with you. I don't think we saw it in cinemas. I think we just had heard about it, and I bought the Blu-ray of it, and we were just like, fuck yeah, let's do it. We just watched it more instantly, like, this is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Oh, good choice.
Thank you.
I think my fourth option, Strictly Ballroom. It's a classic. I have to say, Baz Luhrmann can eat an ass and suck a dick and sell drugs, but I love Strictly Ballroom. It's the only good thing he's ever produced, in my opinion. I know some people love Moulin Rouge. I didn't, but I do understand the likability of it, but I loved Strictly Ballroom.
I think Moulin Rouge and Romeo and Juliet all praise exclusively, and I'm including everyone else in that, exclusively goes to Jill Bilcock, one of the greatest editors of all time. Every other fucking part of those movies makes me frustrated.
Romeo and Juliet was ridiculous. It was like, we'll just get every actor to scream the dialogue. It doesn't matter if they get it or not. It doesn't really matter if they understand what they're saying.
It didn't feel like, to me, like anyone was saying the lines that were actually what was written.
Yeah.
They were saying completely different lines.
But Strictly Ballroom really captured me. My mom showed it to me as a kid. It was filmed in Marrickville, New South Wales. That's our little stomping ground. It's the inner west of Sydney. It's very special to me. And in the 90s, it was full of like Italian and Greek and Spanish immigrants in these little federation houses. And during our time, it's a very like hipster suburb. I think it was ranked like the 10th coolest suburb in the world in 2020, and it's full of like breweries tucked in like little shitty warehouse lanes.
The world is less cool than I remember then.
Yeah, well, Yarraville, Victoria got number 5, and Yarraville's just full of families, to be honest. It's cute, isn't it? But it's full of families. Like, it's not cool. Either way. It was filmed in Marrickville in the 90s. It's a real Sydney that I remember, and it's so like, the theme of it is so clear cut and I think so well done. The whole theme of a life lived in fear is a life half lived. Like, the theme is like basically playing by your own rules is worth it, and it's like worth it to risk it for the biscuit. And I always tear up in that last sequence where they're doing that dance and everyone like the music is pulled and everyone starts clapping so they can start dancing again, and her grandmother is crying as she's like dancing in this red dress that she's sewn for her. It's just beautiful. I love the theme about breaking the rules to do what you want to do and dancing your own steps. And it's also just camp. It's so camp.
It is. It's
Fran,
wonderful.
Who'd want to dance with Fran? Oh, hi, Franny. Like, it's just so fucking fun and fresh. I think if you're an Australian and you haven't seen Strictly Ballroom and you are looking for a good uplifting film, it will bring you joy.
Nice.
Oh, I'm getting emotional talking about it. I think it's just making me homesick.
Yeah.
It's making me think of my mum. What's your fifth one?
All right. So for my final one, I was trying to think. I wanted to include at least one animation, but I couldn't think of one that I go back to frequently. I often go back to animated TV shows rather than movies.
Yeah.
And I realized I would be doing a disservice if I didn't pick this one, because I hate quantifying favorites, but I think it is my favorite movie, and it is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, it's interesting. It brings you comfort. I feel like I watch Eternal Sunshine if I'm ready to get fucked up.
So I'm using the word comfort liberally, because what I would say is that that's a movie I revisit every time I feel like I really need it. which is slightly different than comfort of like, I'm sad and I want to feel better.
No, it's as I said, this is about like films that make you feel like at peace or seen or...
It brings me spiritual comfort.
Yeah.
There's something about both of their journeys. It feels really resonant in my brain as someone who felt like a Joel for a really, really long time as just a sad loner.
Yeah.
And I've always been obsessed in general and in my storytelling of things about memories and traveling through memories. And it does that. And it's also like a movie made in a style that would be exactly how I would want to make a movie, where it's sort of shaky and rough around the edges. When I was younger, I thought of it as a comedy. And then as an adult, I'm like, oh, it's not a comedy, but it's really funny.
It is.
And there's those bits that hit you in the gut, like when Clementine's talking about how she just always wanted to be pretty, that just make me... It feels like someone is actually reaching in and hearing my soul. Like, it's a lot. And it's not like, oh, this is a movie that's devastating. It just really resonates. And I love that movie.
There's this line in The History Boys that I always loved where they're reciting the Drummer Hodge poem. And it's really struck a chord with one of the students, Posner, and his teacher, Hector. I think the line he says is, the best parts of reading are when you come across a phrase or a sentence that you thought only you could describe, that only you could say.
Yeah.
But there it is on the page, written by someone hundreds of years before you, probably long dead. And it's like a hand is reaching out to you and taking yours. And I always think about that. Because when you watch a film like that, it's like someone is like, some like writer or director is like, I hear exactly what you're thinking and what you have felt. And here it is. In a really high form of art, in a really like, I can't even describe, in a form of art that has taken years and masses of people and masses of revisions to produce. Here it is synthesized for you in a story for you to enjoy.
It's just something about it, like when he goes back to being a kid and he's talking about shame, when he's just reflecting on how even if the love he has is temporary, that doesn't make it not valuable. Like, that's wonderful and also heartbreaking and sad. Like, it's just everything I love in a movie in one movie. And I watched it when I was maybe 12 or 13. Too young to really appreciate the depth of it. But yeah, it's a movie that I will probably come back to every time I really need it for the rest of my life. That's my number 5. What's yours?
Mine? Oh, I'm torn. I'm really trying to think if I was like, had to ground myself. I think my last one, and again, this isn't about good films. It's not about what we would pull out to impress someone. One of my major comfort films is the 1968 musical Hello, Dolly.
Yes.
And it is because I remember the first time my mum showed it to me, I was 10 years old. It was 2006, and I was really sick. I'd had to take the day off of school. And my mum pampered me with like movies and treats. She was just such a loving, giving mum. And she always, every day that I had off sick, she was like, let's watch movies together. She loved it. It's almost as if she was like, she really wanted me to be sick. She really wanted me to have a day off with her. But we had this great day. And then at the end of the day, she was like, I want to show you Hello, Dolly. I loved it as a kid. I watched it in India when I was 4. She rents it from Blockbuster. We get through the first half of it and I'm so enchanted. My mum had to bribe me. She was like, go have a bath and we can watch the second half of the film. And I was so excited. I remember running to the bathroom to like turn the bath on and get inside so I could just get back to the movie. And it was like, I'm not a big musical person. Like I really like 2 or 3 musicals maybe. And Hello, Dolly is not even the best musical. But I was obsessed with Dolly Levi, played by Barbra Streisand, how funny she was, how smart and witty she was, how independent she was.
Yeah.
I loved the decadence of the costumes. I'd never seen anything so vibrant. I loved the songs and the campness. And I loved like the grouchy lead. And I loved all of the... What excited me so much is that my mum paused it right as essentially a plot that they had they thought up in the first half of the movie was about to unravel at the midpoint. I was just so excited by it. I think it was like the first time that I was excited by a story and like the midpoint of a story about to like I've never been so excited by the conflict in a story coming to a head right when it should be in the midpoint of a story. And I remember so clearly thinking like, this is insane. Like I've never been so excited. And so I think about that night a lot. I remember eating ice cream with my mum and finishing the film, and I watched it again and again and again obsessively on repeat. And I feel like if I was having a shit day and I like lost the entire sense of who I was and like what I enjoy and what makes me happy anymore, I'd put on Hello Dolly.
Nice.
For sure.
That is a fantastic... the joy in that movie is infectious.
Yeah. There's a reason Wally watches Put On Your Sunday Clothes.
Yeah.
On repeat.
You only showed it to me when I was an adult, and I now love that movie so much. Like, it's such a joyful movie.
Yeah.
What a great pick.
Barbra Streisand, the fucking... The larynx on that bitch.
Yeah.
Wow.
Said the jowls, and that's not right. The
pure jowls of Barb.
Pure jowls.
That's Barb's new
Miss
album.
Barb.
It's just jowls by Barb. I remember my dad's such a Barbara fanatic. He would just like watch YouTube videos of him singing. He loves Barbra Streisand. He always used to sing, people who need people.
I've heard your dad. He didn't sing it like that.
Yeah. Like, people who need people.
Can I do an honorable mention?
Yes, you absolutely can. Is it Barbra Streisand?
It's not.
Oh, forget it.
It's an honorable mention because I only thought of it while you were saying Hello Dolly, and I don't know if it would be in the top 5, but I think it warrants a place. And it is An American Tail, both the original and all 3 of its sequels.
Nice.
Because the first time I watched it was when my mum, my wonderful, wonderful mum, who despite not really having any wealth at all, would spend so long and so much effort trying to save money to take her and myself on these little trips whenever she could. And it was like the only thing we spent money on. We went on this trip to Hamilton Island, which is a small island off the coast of Australia. And one of the things they do is that it's like small enough that on the resort, you only drive around like golf buggies. And she, wanting to be like a cool mum, we did this thing on one particular evening where she was driving and I was sitting on her lap, and she was like sort of quote unquote letting me drive. And it was just golf buggies, and she was controlling
just golf buggies.
She was just little buggies. She was controlling the foot pedals and could grab it at any time. Like, there was no real danger. And we went to park, and she just in a lapse forgot which pedal was which. So right as we were coming up to it, she meant to hit the brake and instead hit accelerator and rammed straight into this giant ceramic pot. Meaning we hit it, and there's no airbags on a golf buggy, so my face slams into the steering wheel, and I get a big black eye. And my mum, being a single mother with this little child, feels devastated. She has just given her child a black eye. So she goes, fuck, I'm going to spoil the fuck out of this kid. So she gets a big bunch of ice cream and goes out to, thematic for this episode, the video store.
Oh, the video store.
And rents An American Tail, I think 3, because 2 of them were made for TV, but I think it was 3, which is the one where it's about the news and dogs. And then the 4th one, which was Five Goes West. We just watched all of them. Oh, that's so nice. I didn't care that I had a black eye. I thought it was so... Just watching that little Jewish mouse... come to America and like who's losing his family, and then he made his own family together, and the New Yorker friend he had, whose name I can't remember. I adored those movies so much when I was a kid.
That's
rather
so
than being
beautiful.
a Disney person or anything, like every single time those movies were on TV, I would sit down and watch them.
I was also thinking about children's films in this one because I wanted to include like a good kids film. And like for me, that would probably be something along the lines of Snow White, which we had on video. And I remember the chunky fucking VHS I used to crack open. I remember the day that it started jumping and I was like, no.
Yeah.
But my honorable mention really quickly
Yeah, sure.
was going to be Time Bandits.
Oh, that's
Because
a good one.
Time Bandits makes me think of like weekends with my brother. We would watch it all the time.
Yeah.
And there's something about the surreal nature of it, how grim and gloomy and creepy and dark it was, but also, and like the end is not uplifting at all. It's an awful end. But there was something so exciting about it. This little kid going on these, like, again, I'm obsessed with time travel, these big, grandiose adventures. And then it's ending with that song that goes, na 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 oh, na na by George Harrison.
Nice.
And it's just a really nice, sweet little film. You made me tear up when you were talking about the fact that it's a thematic thing, this video store, because I know we joke a lot in this podcast about how much we hate films now and how cinema sucks and it's all just a money-making vehicle. But literally when you're a kid and the kids like us, like, it was such like a shining light. Like all my best memories were just watching movies.
Yeah. Just whether it was in the theaters where it would be this incredible, like you really going out for it.
Yeah.
And that was hard in my family because my sister, who I think I've mentioned once or twice, has both Down syndrome and autism, would make other patrons frustrated because she was be noisy when excited. So she was just like joyfully making noises along with the movie because she was having a good time, but it made other people upset. So it was this big fucking ordeal sometimes, but it never ruined it for me. And going to the video store was always an alternative, and being able to like sit down as just an individual and get that little bit of comfort for a few hours.
It's so funny. I feel like going to the cinema was this great event, but all my best memories were just sitting at home because you're just so comfortable and you're so safe at home as a kid. Oh, I feel a lot better.
That's good.
Than if I would have if we had spoken about Baise-Moi for an hour.
Yes.
I feel comforted. I feel happy. And I do love movies. We both love movies.
Yeah.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at RateDescendPod. You can find us on TikTok at RatingDescending. Or you could send us a quick little email at ratingdescending@gmail.com about anything at all.
Anything at all.
Anything at all.
You can also find us on our own social media. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at michelle.stclair.
And you can find me on Insta under Abigail J. Ward.
Also, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, not just because it helps the algorithm, but also because I like it.
Yeah, do it for Michelle. What are we watching next week, Michelle?
Well, next week we're watching Kangaroo Jack.
Yes!
Speaking of movies I watched a lot as a kid.
Yes! I'm actually really keen for that one. We've watched that before and we have enjoyed it. It was the classic bad movie night film.
Mm-hmm. I'm here to say hello to the black, to the white, to the north, to the south.
Thanks for joining us for this very ad hoc, not normal episode.
Yeah.
We will resume normal broadcasting next week.
See you then.
See you then.